Well, hey everyone, I'm glad we're here today. We're looking in God's Word again. We're in our Bible reading plan in the mid chapters of the 30s in Genesis. So 32, 33, 34, in that area is where is our prescribed reading. And so I hope to share with you just a little bit from, if we backtrack in 32 and then look in chapter 33 and just get a nugget. Just get something that will inspire you to read that whole chapter yourself or those chapters yourself and be blessed by it. God will lead you and guide you by the power of His Spirit into all truth. That's a promise in God's Word. Look at it in John 16. So hey, but right now in Genesis, here we are coming up with Jacob trying to leave his uncle Laban's home and his homeland to go back to his own homeland, the homeland that that God had promised to his grandfather Abraham, to his father Isaac, and also to him. And so Jacob prays because he's been in a struggle with his uncle about whether to leave, how to leave, when to leave, all these things. And he prays, God, please, you are the God of my grandfather and my father. Return me. You said return to the land of your relatives. And so that's what I want to do. You promised me I would treat you kindly and all these things. But in a moment, maybe one of the first times in his life, Jacob is humble. He's like, I don't deserve this. I haven't lived my life in such a way that I deserve your grace. But hey, that's the point. Grace is not about deserving. Right here, we're talking about not the faithfulness of Jacob, but the faithfulness of God. And right here, he says, God, please rescue me. Rescue me from the land of my brother Esau, the hand of his brother Esau. See, here's the point. Jacob had lived his life being at odds with people, being in conflict. In conflict with his father Isaac, who he tricked to get the blessing. In conflict with his brother Esau, who he stole the blessing from. He had been in conflict with his uncle Laban, Laban was much like Jacob, and he had taken advantage of Jacob. He'd been in conflict with Leah and Rachel, and he's just very humble. He's like, oh God, help me. And now if I go back, I have to face my brother. And if you remember right, his brother wanted to kill him. That's why he fled. Because he had stolen what was going to be given to him. Now, I know God had a different plan. But just because God has a plan for our lives, don't mean we go take it by force. Let it unfold. Let God bless you in time. Here's my point. God met with Jacob and they wrestled. And Jacob come away humbled, and then he goes on to meet his brother. Jacob looked up in chapter 33. There was Esau coming with 400 men. He divided everything up. He was fearful for his life. But what we find, it says, but in verse 4, but Esau ran to meet Jacob and embraced him and threw his arms around him and kissed him, and they wept. And then Esau looks up, who are all these people? And Jacob's like, God has blessed me, and I want to give something to you. It's basically, I've sent these gifts to you. And Esau's like, I don't need gifts. Can't you see what they're embracing and weeping? The time that was spent apart, God worked in hearts. Both Esau's heart and Jacob's heart, more importantly. Jacob's biggest enemy was himself. Now, what in the world would we take? I am quickly reminded that sometimes the biggest obstacle I have in my life is me. And I'm also reminded of this, and maybe you can relate to that, and maybe you can relate to this one as well. Sometimes there's relationships that we think are irreparable, but there's times if your heart is being changed, you have to trust that someone else's heart is being changed. Maybe it's your biggest enemy from the past, a relationship that has been severed, but it's time to revisit that. We need to learn that. We need to not just give up forever. Trust God to be faithful to work in your heart and in the heart of that person that you've been estranged from a long time. I know this may not apply to everybody, but I'm sure it applies to someone. Please consider who you need to revisit. And may God bless you and work in your life, in your heart, and in maybe your enemies as well. Let's remember that when we mine out the truths of Genesis and chapter 33. God bless you. We'll talk again soon.